Get ready for some Italian countryside painting with me, y'all. Hi, my name is Clarice, and I am going to teach you guys how to paint a simple and loose Italian Tuscan countryside watercolor painting. This series is inspired by my watercolor retreat happening in Tuscany, Italy this May 2024. And all supplies for this retreat are sponsored by Princeton Brushes and Maimeri Blue. This series is going to be just a teeny tiny taste of what we will be experiencing during our 3 in plein air watercolor workshops in Tuscany this May. So if this sounds amazing to you and you're interested in joining us in Tuscany this May for amazing watercolor in the beautiful Italian countryside, I've linked all the details in the description below. So check it out and send me a message if you're joining us. Hi guys, welcome to another video tutorial with me, Clarice. This is part 2 to my Tuscan Countryside series, and this is what we are going to be painting together. Now I have a base drawing for this and I have linked that below and all the information on how you can get that, but feel free to also just trace it out yourself. I've also linked the reference image as well, so if you want to challenge yourself, look at the image and trace it yourself, why not? All the supplies I'm using in this video are listed in the description below, so feel free to check those out. And last but not least, if you're wondering what the Tuscan series is all about, it is about my upcoming watercolor retreat to Tuscany. I have linked the details to that below as well, so feel free to check that out. And on that note, let's begin. Using the oval brush, we're going to take some of our cerulean blue and start dampening our sky. We're gonna have to skirt around our trees a bit, but that's okay. And even if you get on top of the trees, that's not too bad because the trees are going to be a much darker color, so don't worry about it too much. So we're just going to loosely go all around, and then we're going to take a little bit of ultramarine and perhaps even a little bit of the Payne's Gray and get a slightly darker blue happening. So just get some blue directly from the color cake as well, and just drop that in right where it sort of touches our horizon. We're very loosely sort of going around to do this, and then this ultramarine mixed in with our leftover cerulean, just sort of drop that at the top. Just gonna lightly sort of dab it all around, and then you can move your page top bottom to sort of get a good mixture, or you can even sort of help it along and get a nice gradual mix. Just dropping in some more darker hues here, just so our horizon line is a little more pronounced. Remember, watercolor dries up a lot lighter than it actually looks like when it is damp. Okay, so we let this dry. Our next step is pretty much similar to the first video that we did. We can take our paper towel and just sort of scrunch it up and just lightly dab to get a little bit of cloudy sort of effects. I'm kind of going really tiny as we go lower, but this really helps, gives us some nice texture and shapes. Okay, so we've got that happening. Now the next thing we're going to do is head on to doing our grassy bits. So we'll do a little bit of our yellow ochre. I think it's like the perfect color to start off at the top there, and then slowly branch as we branch or go downward. Branch is also a word that could describe our process. We're going to add a little bit of our
not sap green, hooker's green, because this is the darker green. Although you could start off with sap and then gradually add hooker's green, because then you have a gradual dark to light. So starting off with some of my yellow ochre, I'm going to mix it onto this area here. And again, if you feel like you're easier, this process is easier using a number 6, go ahead and do that. I'm just using the oval brush, just because it gives me more coverage. And again, we're kind of lightly grazing, pulling downward, going all over the place. Our sketch is a basic idea of where we'll be transitioning into different colors. So make sure you have sketched it out and you are able to see it, and that the consistency that you're painting these things in is a lot lighter. Now, one more thing, keep in mind where your road is, because that needs to be left alone. And that's going to be our so-called white space. Same thing at the top there. If it makes it easier, I would suggest using masking tape for your road, so this way you don't go past that. What I'm also going to do is take off most of the color from my brush and just lightly dab this along, and then kind of move this downward. I'm not going too much because we're gonna focus in on doing our top first, and then gradually bring it down. Dropping some darker spots in here before we kind of move on to doing this portion here. So kind of just take your time, go around roughly and fill up these areas with your yellow ochre. And as I said, make sure you're not filling up your road. Perfect. Let me see, maybe a little bit over here. It's got a little hint of stuff there. Okay, so now we can graduate to adding some, what did I say? Sap green. So getting some of that sap green, I'm going to drop some of that over here, just sort of loosely dropping it. The point about this part, or the important part over here, is making sure that your area is still damp, and that's how you get these nice beautiful blends happening. Now I'm adding a little bit of the sap green in these areas, but I do want to add a lot more of the hooker's green, because it's going to be a lot darker. This is just giving me a gradual blend into our hooker's green, and possibly some of the browns in certain areas over there. So if you look at the image, you'll see exactly what I'm referencing. All right, get a little bit of that happening over here. Some of it over here. We need to allow this to dry just a tad bit more before we can go in and add some nice lines. But in the meantime, we can go ahead and add some of this green, and then by the time we're ready to come back up here, it'll be a tad bit dried. So let's do that. So here we go. We're taking some of that sap green, and I'm just sort of gradually pulling it down to this part, this layer, adding some loose bits in there. And then what I'm going to do is add that around this pathway as well. So kind of keeping it very, very loose. I'm just loosely dampening this area with our green. And then as we come lower, I'm just dabbing that green on here so that the darkest green is around this area. And this green also needs to have a little bit of brown. But here's an important part that will give us that nice little textured bit, what we want to do is take our number 1 and just lightly pull up the green. Now I get that we've not done the road yet, so this might be a little bit premature, but I wasn't quite decided if I was going to do much to the road, so we'll see as we go along. We'll probably have to add that in again, or maybe have done the road first and then do this part. So here we go, adding a little bit of green here, more watered down. I'm going to add a little bit of the hooker's green to this bit here so that it stands out a bit more from as a foreground in comparison to the background bit. So you want to do that condensed feel to gradual fade off in there. Okay. And this is the perfect time. This is the loose way of just like really dabbing to get some beautiful textures happening. And then we can extend this over to our area over here. Now for this part, just make sure you're kind of skirting around the areas we have marked for our flowers. I'm going very, very loosely around these bits. Use it as a marker situation to help you loosely leave some space, okay? Now this is going to help us because we're not using masking tape, but you totally can. And add some of your red there, or if you want to leave it more of a, I don't know, like a white, that also helps. I'll sort of leave that up to you guys, but I'm going to be using my vermilion for these flowers. So we're dampening this area. So I'm going to make this a time lapse just so you guys are not bored by this, but take your time, pause this video, and just go for it all around. So I started a little bit already, but what I'm doing over here is making sure we have that nice dark to light effect happening. So again, refer to your image, get some of that hooker's green, and get to dabbing in here. Now, again, it is helpful if your area is still a tiny bit damp or even wet. Actually damp, more damp than wet, because then you're not getting such a flare up in color, but you're getting a gradual sort of blend that still allows you to see that this area is a darker version. So what you can also do for the lower bits is get a little bit of burnt umber, mix that in just to get a slightly darker hue happening at the bottoms in certain areas here, especially under the flowers. I would go under the flowers and just sort of add little dabs of color here. This will really be helpful when we start adding our flowers. It's going to give us that nice, beautiful impression of shadows. Now we don't want to go too much all over the place, but try and go at least at the most foreground flowers. So I'm kind of gradually going upward, so that's not too bad. Okay, so now our next step is going to be, just so we get a veil of this before it dries off, is using the back of our brush. We're going to lightly add little lines to kind of indicate grassy bits happening. It has to be damp for you to be able to see this. We could have done the same thing over here on this end. just a few areas here and there. Okay, not too much. Although I think if it was darker here, we'd get a better impression. I'm gonna get a little bit more of that darker color happening here. All right, so now we can move on to adding a little bit of our, this is where our little palette comes in handy. It would be nice to add a little bit of the burnt umber or maybe even burnt sienna within our grassy bits here. But again, if it's too much for you, you're not really feeling the burnt sienna, don't worry about it. I'm gonna get my number 4 and add some of that burnt sienna, just a little bit here and there before things dry off too quickly. I think this area is pretty much dried up, but it would still be nice to get a little bit of some of this happening here. We're just peppering these areas here with some brown, which is this lovely burnt sienna, which gives us a little bit more of a divide in our structure, and then also kind of guides the eye as to what things are. So we're adding this as little key points here and there. I'm gonna get a little bit of that darker brown that we have. What is it? Burnt umber. Just a little bit, and I'm dropping that in by the tree areas here and allowing it to sort of blend into our burnt sienna. And it's such a great little addition to our greens and stuff. So then we don't have that stark looking green as much, but we've got a little bit of texture within our fields, almost, you could say. So I won't do too much over here, but I'm sort of blending that into the green. Get a little bit of that happening over here. I think now is a good enough time because you could even get away with a little bit of a splatter for this bit. But I don't want to splatter with the trees still bare. So I'm going to hold off for a little while. So get to doing a little bit more of this bit here around this tree. You'll notice that there's a little bit of a bushy area happening here, and it can sort of extend into this area here. So it's very much like our Impressionist Van Gogh style. We're doing a lot of dabbing to get these effects, which is very liberating and not taxing because you're not chasing after a realistic look, but you're chasing after a I wouldn't say we're chasing anything really, but we're aiming more to let loose and just go easy with our dabbing. Okay, now using the number 4, I'm getting a little bit more of our green, and we're just going to dab a little bit of that happening around there and sort of gradually really press down and like pull it downward like this. So like holding the brush sideways, getting a little bit more color and just helping it downward. So your darkest area needs to be the closest, and then it's a gradual fade as you go up. Add some of that green right here in between the trees. So you can tell it's like a continuation. Perfect. And so now using the same mixture of green that we have, we're going to get either the number 1, let's take the number 1. And I like adding a little bit of brown to it and getting that nice woodsy sort of green. That's my preference. And what we're going to do is we're going to lightly add some little lines happening wherever you see in the image. So for instance, I know there's a little bit of texture happening over here. So I'm just going to lightly add a couple of lines. Now it looks very in your face. So what I suggest doing is hard lined is what the, not in your face, hard line. So take your number 4 with water on it and just lightly go over the area. So you've got a nice blend of color, but you can see the lines. And this is a quick way of making sure you're not getting too much of a straight lined, hard edged version of stuff here. So same thing along here. Like this is the road area. So I'm just sort of lightly going across. I'm adding these little lines, which is like, I think it's like rows of grass or what have you. And again, you can go lighter or just take your brush and then lightly smush it around, spread it around. So you're getting a gradual fade. I'm going to get a little bit more water, and then these are the lines that go slightly upward like this. Keep it loose, keep it fun. Some are coming downward this way. And then taking my brush, I'm going to lightly move the color around. You're just taking a damp brush, by the way, a second brush, and doing this. You could even dampen the area first and then add your little strokes. That might also be helpful for you. See which technique you like better and go with that, because they're pretty much the same. We're aiming for the same sort of idea. So let's do the opposite, the flip of dampening the area first and then going in. I'm going to dampen the area around the trees here. We don't want to have pools of water, just light dampening to get our nice gradient-ish sort of effect. So now taking some of that green with my number 1, I'm just going to zigzag first here. In fact, I might not even do the lines here. I think I just like the zigzag bit to show us what's happening, and just maybe add a little bit more of the green for more of a layered look. And then now over here by the road, let's get, before we get to the road bit and start any more, let's get a faint color of brown over on the road. So then this way we're not painting over white and then having to paint again. So here we go. For the road, I really like, let's use burnt umber for the road. Very, very light, muted version of it. So I'm just dampening this area here. And then let's just get some of that down here. And then where's our burnt umber? Right here. And I'm getting a very muted version of it. And I'm going to add that on here. Perfect. So now this bit, because it's a little bit extra damp, you can help move the color around a little bit and leave some white space in between so that it gives you that nice winding road sort of impression. You can even go in with a tad bit of that greenish umber and just add in a couple of lines in the direction of the road, and you're getting a beautiful kind of blend. So this area needs to be a little bit more dried up, or maybe just get a darker hue. Okay, let's use this, the one. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, and then we've got our road at the top, although I think leaving that bit white works, and just maybe highlighting some areas in there just to kind of intensify the edges of the road. And hey, this is a very loose rendition of a beautiful Tuscan scene. So if you're looking to just kind of go with the flow and make this, add a little bit of green in there, sure, why not? Even though the image doesn't show you green, but who says you can't have a little bit of green in there? So I'm going to add a little bit of feathering happening over here in this area. We're going to get a little bit of the brown mixed in with some of the green that we have. We're going to add a little bit of feathering here. And again, I'm using my zero. Not number one, zero. Princeton Heritage 0. I'm going to add more green sort of leafy grassy lines around here to kind of give that impression happening. And the background actually needs to have a little bit of green, which we didn't sort of get to. So I'm just loosely dropping in some green as well. Okay, so we're pretty much completed most of the main bits. For these areas here, it's nice to add a little bit of a zigzaggy pattern because it sort of gets onto the road. So again, we're going very loose, lightish on the color, and kind of just adding little dabs as we progress downward. And you'll notice that we're going to be doing a little bit of that over here on this side too. This bit is layering, lots of layering using our wet on dry techniques. And then let's get some of that umber. Burnt sienna, sorry, not umber. We need a little bit of that brownish hue and just drop that in here. While just sort of getting to this area before the green dries off so we can get a nice blend. This is where we get some nice wet on wet happening and also keeping things loose. So we've done that. What I want to do before this dries up is getting a little bit of our burnt umber and dropping some of that along this edge here, so that we get a nice beautiful blend. And you can also see differentiation in level. And then sort of blend in some of that into the upper area here, because all this area needs to be greenish and not just the brown. So we're just lightly dabbing all around. We're just building up on these areas here just to sort of have some stuff stand out some more. And mimic the picture as best as we can. But these are all great techniques that we are learning through this exercise to help us with other watercolor projects. But so I hope these are stimulating your brain to really think about, okay, this is what I can use for this project that you might be working on. And it's all about layering. I'm pretty sure you're getting the hang of that right now, or by now. So getting more of that darker hue, you're just building up certain areas that you want to stand out more. Just go back and add more. I'm just going to dot a little bit of the green over here. So I want it to be more green in this area so it doesn't blend in too much with our road. And I promise once we are done this, we're going to be tackling our main big trees. And then we're almost at the tail end of our exercise. What we need to finish off with is doing our flowers, and then it should be good. So when you feel like you've got too dark of a color on there, just take wash off your brush and blend it in. And then remember the lines we were doing at the bottom here. You could do something very similar up here. Let me just add some more of this stuff around here, and then we'll get to that. I want to add a little bit of that texture coming from the back over here too, and kind of stopping right there and getting a little bit of brown in there. And then taking a brush that doesn't have any color, just water, we're going to blend this in. We've just created two different levels over there. And now same thing over here. I've noticed that some of these areas are like very, very different on different levels. And I know these are very subtle things, but I think they really do make such a big impact when you just go in with a little bit of color like I just did and create a little line. And then maybe add a slightly darker tone just on the edge of it so it sort of blends. Maybe that's a little bit too burnt umberish, but y'all get the idea. We're just sort of creating levels in our fields. Even drop in some green if it's too umber. Wait, it is umber? Sienna, sorry. We are going to be in beautiful Sienna in Tuscany, and I am using Sienna. How ironic. Well, not really. It is a pretty brown. Finally reached the portion of our trees, and so for the trees, if you notice in the image, we've got more of like light hitting the trees on this side, so it's a lighter green on this side, on the left side of the trees, and majority of it is going to be dark. So we are going to start off, because I really like how the sap green looks, so we're going to start off with doing sap green just in like certain areas around here. And then once we have these areas set in, we're going to get our darker tone. And that's going to be a mixture of sap green with some of, I always mix these up, burnt umber. And we're going to paint all of this in. So I'm just going to do these first two here. I don't want to make this video super long, so I'm going to make the rest of it a time lapse, but this is what you guys can watch me do and then do it on your end. So here we go. This needs to be really dark, so we're going in and just dampening up this whole area. Get more, you can even get some of the hooker's green in there. I think the hooker's green in with this mixture also will be helpful. Get some on the outskirts. Make sure that the edges are a little bit jaggedy and not perfectly round. Get some water and really help this color move around. I love that little shade of brown happening in there. Can dampen up this whole area, and then it'll be easier to just drop in some color as well. Like that would be nice. You can get a little bit of a jaggedy edge happening if you just sort of lightly graze and extend outward. Same thing on this side. Beautiful. I love this. Drop more of the darker hue at the bottom. And all along the right hand side, really, if you're going really bang on with what the picture shows you. Okay, so that's pretty much the whole technique for our tree. For the base, we can just take more of the brown and add that in. I'm leaving a little bit of white space in there. Just like that. And then here we go. Here's this branch or stump. I'm going to do these as well, why not? And then mixing it with our green, we're going to go ahead and paint the rest. All right, guys, so I'm going to be right back. You can pause this video like I mentioned and do your own, and then unpause and get back once I am done the time lapse. All the trees, including the ones in the back, and I've added a little bit of extra shading around these areas. So again, it's the same techniques that we've been using throughout this video. So just pause, do these little details, and then we can carry on with doing our flowers. Before we get to the flowers, guys, I want to remind you, if you're looking to get more information on this retreat, we've got just a couple of spots left, so check the description below. And if you like this video, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button, as I do videos like this often, and you guys are guaranteed to have fun and grow in watercolor. Okay, so I'm going to be using my vermilion and taking my number 4. I really like how the white looks, but I think I was wondering if I should leave a couple white, but let's just go with the flow and see where this takes us. So I've got some vermilion on my number 4, and we are going to go for it. We're starting with tiny little dots in the higher up areas. And by dots, I mean like very organic, like shapes. And then as we come lower, we're gonna extend and create more of a brush stroke. And as we come even lower here, what I want to do is tackle these as best as we can, or as quick as we can, and then add a little bit of the Payne's gray to this hue, and just kind of add a little bit of undertones to them, just kind of amplifying our florals even more. Look at this bright, gorgeous color. Oh my word. Love it. It's helpful if you add a little bit of extra water in some, so some of them are lighter, others are darker. Just adds more visual interest and makes it extra pretty. So what I think would be a good idea is the areas that are completely white, make those a lighter color, and then the ones that are darker, go for a more potent mixture of the vermilion and get that in. How about that? And then tell me how that works for you. This is such a gorgeous color. I love it. As we're coming closer here, I'm just leaving lots of white space in between. And I'm not shying away from overlapping some of this on my on the green, because that also kind of looks like a little bit of shadow area. So you could really let loose and just keep things light. All right, so almost done. Let's get a little bit of Payne's gray and mix that in with some of this. I want just enough to give me a nice darker version of this color that I can just sort of add at the base to kind of help speak for a shadow, perhaps. And that's beautiful. I really like how this is turning out. I am going to pause in just a moment so we can take a step back and have a look-see, but not before we do a little bit of a splatter. Now, it helps to sort of cover up the areas you don't want the splatter in, so let's just do that. Perfect. Can't quite see it too well, and that's mainly because It is such a darker color. But feel free to stop when you feel inclined to stop. I will stop now. Okay, here we go. And these ones that we don't really need, I'm just going to lightly sort of dab so that they don't stick. And by stick, I mean show up really bright. Okay, and I think that's good enough. So here we go, guys. Without much further ado, our second rendition to, or second video to the Tuscan Countryside Series. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I am looking forward to seeing your work, so please make sure you tag me and share it on the Facebook group as well. I've listed the social media handles below. And if you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you next month in the beginning of the month for a third video in our Tuscan series. Thanks guys for watching, and we'll chat soon.